This series got me started when I heard, I saw the material that was out there for the Do the Right Thing by Chuck Colson. And I went online and checked it out. Integrity matters. How we conduct ourselves in life matters. I'm known as a pastor, and then as a youth pastor, as a college worker. People just don't know the truth today. We have a generation that's almost biblically illiterate. Chuck Colson, in a video, got up and said, you know, here I am, a Marine Corps officer. My father was a Marine Corps guy. I'm a lawyer. I'm a major firm guy. I get invited by President Nixon to be one of his counsel. I put everything I own into a blind trust. I tell all my law partners, you're not allowed to come to the White House or contact me at all during the time. He said, I went out of my way to put myself above and beyond temptation. And there he said I was in the Oval Office. There was 4 or 5 of us with President Nixon. And there had been a document taken that somebody got a hold of. And the President of the United States said to H.R. Haldeman, do we have a plan, Bob, to get it back? Can we go get it? And as the President's counsel, he said it was his opportunity to say, Mr. President, what about the consequences? He said, at that moment in time, my integrity failed me, and I never opened my mouth. He said, because of that, Nixon went from possibly one of the greatest presidents of all time to the worst because of that moral lapse. He said, I could have changed history by just opening my mouth. He ended up going to jail. He ended up coming to Christ. He's become a revolutionary when it comes to impacting our prison systems with the gospel. But you know what? What great loss. What great loss for our nation. That whole incident, only because somebody didn't open their mouth and say, we got to do the right thing. Now I want you to reflect upon that as we're going through this series. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard to do the right thing. It's hard to be the little voice in the room. That you know the truth. You have this absolute anchor in your life of Jesus Christ. You have this personal relationship with the God of the Bible who has saved you, who has set you free. We're functioning in a pluralistic world where the I'm okay, you're okay generation has come about, where there is no moral absolute. It's moral relativism. You can't tell someone what they've done wrong. And what you end up with is more legislation and more loopholes. Well, we come to this thing about, okay, if we know what is right, if we really know it, can we live it? We're at a crossroads as in Christianity. Are we going to change the way we function? You see, once we have our core of right and wrong, the question arises whether or not we can do the right thing. Even that we know what is right, sometimes we choose otherwise. How can we change our actions so that we can better align with doing good? C.S. Lewis's book, The Abolition of Man, helps us to understand this problem. Lewis explains that our appetites and our desires, our belly, need to be under control of reason, our head. We know the truth, but we have these emotions, deep-seated emotions and feelings that are driving us. And reason and emotions aren't always a good thing. But given the strength of our appetites, reason by itself is insufficient to control them. The head needs the chest, the heart, to govern the belly. Our chest is the seat of our trained emotions, that the desire to pursue virtue. The problem in our society, which Lewis saw coming in 1943 when he published this book, is that we have rejected the idea of training people in virtue, and then we're shocked when people do the wrong thing. Jeremiah said this, some 800 years before Jesus Christ, the heart is deceitfully above all things, desperately wicked. Who can understand it? The deep seat of our hearts lead us astray. In Romans 2, it says, they show the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness. Their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. We see all of this. We see it played out in business. We see it played out in our government, where moral relativism has replaced moral truth in people's education. Chuck Colson was sharing, and we're doing the video this coming Thursday night because I really want you to see what they were sharing in this Princeton discussion. Our prison system in the past 25 years has gone from 229,000 people incarcerated to close to 2.9 million. There's a direct correlation between the breakdown of morals and ethics in our society due to the erosion of the family structure. If you follow the social work network that's out there and you look at foster care, do you know that a kid that goes through to age 18 in foster care, the likelihood of them becoming incarcerated is 75%. If a child goes all the way through it, never is adopted, is never welcomed into be a part of a real family, and part of that family unit and structure with the love and the nurturing nature, 75% of those kids go to jail. The church isn't immune to these problems. You talk to Josh McDowell and people like that, 70% of our kids raised in church. Kids that are raised in Christian homes, when they get to college, they walk away from the truth. Why all this? Why is all this happening? Well, you see, just because you know the truth doesn't mean you can live it. And there's some unpacking I think we have to do, and some evaluations that we have to do in our Christian lives if we're going to really understand what's it going to take when your 5 minutes comes up and you can open your mouth that will determine whether you open your mouth or not. Habits of the heart. It's about virtue. The Bible, there's countless verses that talk about adding virtue to our lives. The solution would seem to be that we would develop habits of the heart to lead to right behavior. This requires two things. One, conversion. Conversion, repentance, is a change of direction. It is saying, God, I have been living this way in my life, and I now choose to live this way for you. I am now going to go in this direction. I need you to do it. It requires a commitment to a higher being, the God of glory. The second thing is this. It needs to be a commitment to community. If we were to live ethically and to make the right behavior a habit in our hearts, for this to happen historically and experientially, we have to be committed to some form of community. Those are the two things. We have to have a commitment to the God of glory, because we know, as we saw last week, that we can't do it on our own. We can't do it. We cannot within ourselves, because our hearts are desperately wicked. And the second thing is we have to have a wingman. You have to have the influence of discipleship into your life to be able to formulate and shape and to gain from experience what you need to survive and to succeed in life. Okay, I'm going to date myself this morning. One of my favorite groups of all time was Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I'm young. You got to throw that in, but this song that I'm going to give you this morning, he wasn't a part of the band then. He was on the album, but he wasn't part of the band then. Anyway, it was written by Graham Nash. Teach your children. Do you know why he wrote the song? I'll read the words in a second. He wrote the song because of the disastrous relationship to his father, who was in jail, who was an alcoholic. Out of that, he wrote the words to this song. It says, you who are on the road must have a code that you live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. Teach your children well. Their father's hell will slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams. The one they picks, the one you'll know by. Don't ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. Okay, stay there. So just look at them and sigh, and you know they love you. Teach your children well. I think you know where I'm going with this morning. We're going to talk about the community aspect of what we have, because there's a struggle. There really is, and I'm part of the struggle. You don't think pastors are free of the struggles of the world? It lies within the fact that we're busy. Somehow we've got this thing going in our lives that for men and women today, it's about achievement. It's about success. It's about being the busyness of life. It's about accomplishing things. You know, to raise our kids well, to raise our kids to be devout believers, to raise our children to become what God has called them to be. You know, we just need great schools with really good teachers, and everything will be okay. You know, we just need really good organizations like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or the YMCA with really great instructors, people who will invest in my kids' lives. Everything will just be okay. If I could just find the right church, you know, with all the cool programs to plug my kids into, they would get the right mentors and the right counselors, and everything will be okay. There's a problem with that. Mom, Dad, single parent, it's your responsibility before God to teach your children well. It's my responsibility as the head of my home to sit down with my wife and develop a plan to empower my kids, you know?